The snow fell in silent sheets over New York City, blanketing the streets in a hush that felt like the world holding its breath. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of Times Square, his heart pounding louder than the cheers of the New Year's Eve crowd. He hadn't seen Lucas in 6 months, and the ache of that absence burned sharper than the winter cold. 6 months ago, Ethan had boarded a plane to Seattle for a tech job that promised to change his Lifia chance to lead a startup's app development team. It was the kind of opportunity he'd dreamed of since he was a kid coding in his parents' basement in Ohio. But leaving Lucas behind in their cramped Brooklyn apartment had felt like tearing out a piece of his soul. Lucas, with his sharp wit and quiet strength, had been his anchor through college, through coming out to his conservative family, through every late-night panic attack when the world felt too heavy. They'd promised to make it work. Long distance, they said, was just a test. But phone calls dwindled under the weight of Ethan's 80-hour workweeks and Lucas's grueling shifts as a paramedic. Texts became shorter, more perfunctory. By November, Ethan had started to fear the silence meant something worse than exhaustion. Had Lucas moved on? Had the distance eroded what they'd built over 3 years together? Now, standing in the glow of Times Square's neon lights, Ethan clutched his phone, rereading Lucas's last message, "Meet me at our spot." Midnight. Their spot was a small bench near the edge of the square, where they'd shared their first kiss 2 years ago, under the same falling snow. Ethan's breath hitched as he scanned the crowd, his dark hair damp from melting flakes. What if Lucas didn't show? The clock on his phone read 11:58. 2 minutes. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd flown across the country on a whim, booking a red-eye flight after Lucas's message came through yesterday. No plan, no certainty, just a desperate need to see him, to know if they could still salvage what they had. A figure emerged from the crowd, moving with a familiar gait. Lucas. His blonde hair was shorter now, his leather jacket scuffed from months of wear, but his blue eyes locked onto Ethan's with the same intensity that had always made Ethan feel seen. The world slowed as Lucas stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "Ethan," Lucas said, his voice rough, like he'd been holding back a storm. "You came," Ethan whispered, his throat tight. He wanted to close the distance, to pull Lucas into his arms, but fear rooted him in place. What if this was goodbye? Lucas took a step closer, snow dusting his shoulders. "I wasn't sure you'd be here. I wasn't sure you'd want me to be," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. The countdown began in the distance. 10, 9, 8. The crowd's roar swelled, but Ethan only heard the thud of his own heart. Lucas's gaze softened, and he reached out, his fingers brushing Ethan's. The touch was electric, a spark reigniting something Ethan had feared was lost. As the crowd shouted Happy New Year and confetti rained down, Lucas closed the gap, his lips crashing into Ethan's with a desperation that mirrored Ethan's own. The kiss was raw, full of unspoken apologies and promises. For a moment, the world was just them, the snow, and the bench where it all began. They pulled back, foreheads pressed together, breath mingling in the cold air. "I'm sorry," Lucas murmured. "I let the distance get to me. I thought, maybe you were better off without me." Ethan shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. "I was drowning without you." They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the crowd's cheers faded into a distant hum. But the moment was fleeting. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of the life waiting for him back in Seattle. And Lucas's radio crackled, a call from the ambulance station pulling him back to duty. "We need to talk," Lucas said, his voice steady but urgent. "Really talk. About us. About what happens next." Ethan nodded, his heart racing with hope and fear. "Tomorrow. Breakfast at Rosie's. Lucas smiled. A small, cautious thing that made Ethan's chest ache. It's a date. As Lucas disappeared into the crowd, Ethan touched the bench, his fingers tracing the carved words, "Love finds a way." He wanted to believe it. But the weight of the past 6 months lingered, and he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The next morning, Rosie's diner was a warm contrast to the icy streets outside. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, and Ethan sat in their usual booth, nervously tapping his mug. Lucas slid into the seat across from him, his paramedic uniform wrinkled from a night shift. "I didn't sleep," Lucas admitted, his eyes bloodshot but focused. "Kept thinking about you. About us." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "I messed up, Lucas. I got so caught up in work. I forgot what mattered. But I'm here now. I want to fix this." Lucas's jaw tightened, and he looked away, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. "It's not just you. I pulled away too. The job, it's been brutal. I saw things this year that." He stopped, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to burden you." Ethan reached across the table, taking Lucas's hand. "You're not a burden. You never were." They talked for hours, peeling back the layers of hurt and misunderstanding. Lucas spoke of the trauma from his job car accidents, overdoses, moments that left him hollow. Ethan confessed how the pressure of his startup had consumed him, how he'd buried his loneliness in code and deadlines. By the time they left the diner, the snow had stopped, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over the city. They walked side by side, their shoulders brushing, and Ethan felt a flicker of the connection they'd once had. But doubts lingered. Could they rebuild what they'd lost? Or was this reunion just a fleeting moment before life pulled them apart again? As they reached Central Park, Lucas stopped, turning to face Ethan. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice raw. "But I know I don't want to lose you again." Ethan's heart swelled, but before he could respond, his phone rang. His boss's name flashed on the screen. Seattle was calling him back. Ethan stared at the phone, the ringtone slicing through the fragile moment. Lucas's eyes followed his gaze, and a shadow crossed his face. "You gonna answer that?" Ethan hesitated, then silenced the call. "It can wait," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket. But the weight of it lingered, a reminder of the 3,000 miles between their lives. They walked deeper into Central Park, the snow crunching under their boots. The park was quieter than the city beyond, the bare trees standing like sentinels against the gray sky. Ethan wanted to say something to bridge the gap, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he reached for Lucas's hand, their fingers interlocking naturally, like muscle memory. "I missed this," Ethan said softly. "Just being with you." Lucas squeezed his hand, but his expression was guarded. "Me too. But it's not just about missing each other, Ethan. We've been living separate lives. I don't even know who you are in Seattle." The words stung, but they were true. Ethan had changed in Seattle harder, more driven, maybe even colder. The startup world demanded it. He'd traded late-night talks with Lucas for late-night coding sessions, swapped their shared dreams for stock options. "I'm still me," Ethan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just got lost in it. The job, the pressure. I thought I was building something for us." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face him. "For us? Or for you?" Ethan flinched. "Both. I thought if I could make it there, we'd have a future. A real one. Not scraping by in a one-bedroom apartment." Lucas's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. I never needed more than what we had. I just needed you. The confession hung between them, heavy and raw. Ethan wanted to argue, to defend the choices he'd made. But he saw the hurt in Lucas's eyes, hurt he'd caused by chasing a dream that didn't include them both. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing. Lucas looked away, his breath visible in the cold air. I know. And I'm not innocent either. I shut you out. It was easier to focus on work than to face how much I missed you. They stood in silence, the weight of their mistakes pressing down. Around them, families skated on the park's rink, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension between them. Ethan wanted to fix this, to make promises he wasn't sure he could keep. But before he could speak, Lucas's radio crackled again. Unit 17. We've got a multi-vehicle collision on the FDR. ETA 5 minutes. Lucas cursed under his breath, his hand tightening around Ethan's. I have to go. Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Can I see you tonight? Lucas hesitated, then nodded. My place. 7. As Lucas jogged toward the park's exit, Ethan watched him go, a familiar ache settling in his chest. He pulled out his phone and saw a voicemail from his boss. We need you back by Monday. Big meeting with investors. Monday. That gave him 2 days. 2 days to figure out if they could rebuild what they'd lost, or if he'd fly back to Seattle with nothing but regret. That evening, Lucas's apartment felt both familiar and foreign. The same creaky floorboards, the same faded couch, but the air was different, thicker, charged with unspoken questions. Lucas had showered and changed into a sweater, his hair still damp. He handed Ethan a beer, and they sat on the couch, the space between them feeling like miles. Tell me about Seattle, Lucas said, his tone careful. What's it like? Ethan took a sip, buying time. It's intense. The startup's growing fast. I'm leading a team now, building an app that could change how people connect online. But it's lonely. I don't know anyone there. Not really. Lucas nodded, his fingers tracing the label on his bottle. Sounds like you're killing it. I'm proud of you. You know. The words warmed Ethan, but they also hurt. I don't feel like I'm killing it. Not when I'm losing you. Lucas looked up, his eyes searching Ethan's. Are you losing me? The question hung in the air, sharp and vulnerable. Ethan wanted to say no, to promise they'd find a way. But the truth was messier. I don't know, he admitted. I want us to work. But I don't know how to do that with an ocean between us. Lucas leaned back, exhaling heavily. I've been thinking about that too. I could, maybe transfer. There's a paramedic program in Seattle. But it's not simple. I'd be starting over, leaving my crew, my life here. Ethan's heart leapt at the idea, but guilt followed. I don't want you to give up everything for me. That's not fair. Fair. Lucas laughed, but it was bitter. None of this is fair. I love you, Ethan, but I'm scared. Scared we'll try and fail anyway. The admission hit Ethan like a punch. He set his beer down and moved closer, their knees touching. I'm scared too. But I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. Lucas's eyes glistened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might pull away. But instead, Lucas leaned in, kissing him softly, almost tentatively. It wasn't the desperate kiss from New Year's of '8, was something deeper. A question and an answer all at once. They spent the night talking, laughing, remembering. Lucas told stories about his coworkers, about saving a kid from a burning car, about the nightmares that followed. Ethan shared his own battles, the sleepless nights, The imposter syndrome. The way he'd stare at his phone, willing Lucas to call. By midnight, they were tangled together on the couch. The weight of the past 6 months lighter, but not gone. Ethan traced circles on Lucas's back, his mind racing. He didn't want to leave. But Seattle wasn't just a job, it was his future. Their future, if he could make it work. As dawn broke, Ethan woke to Lucas watching him, his expression unreadable. "What happens now?" Lucas asked. Ethan didn't have an answer. But he knew one thing. He wasn't ready to let go. The morning light filtered through Lucas's curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. Ethan lay beside him, their legs entwined under the blanket. But the warmth of the moment couldn't quiet the storm in his mind. Today was his last full day in New York before his flight back to Seattle. Lucas stirred, his hand resting on Ethan's chest. "You're thinking too loud," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Ethan managed a small smile. "Just trying to figure out how to stop time." Lucas propped himself up on one elbow, his blue eyes studying Ethan. "You can't. But we can figure out what's next. Together." The word together hung in the air, fragile and full of possibility. Ethan wanted to cling to it, but the reality of their lives loomed large. His job in Seattle was non-negotiable, at least for now. And Lucas's life was here, in the chaos of New York streets, saving lives one call at a time. They got up, moving through the morning with a quiet intimacy. Lucas made coffee, and Ethan flipped through a stack of Lucas's paramedic textbooks, marveling at the notes scribbled in the margins. They avoided the heavy questions, focusing instead on small moments: burnt toast, shared laughter, the way Lucas's hand brushed Ethan's as they washed dishes. But the clock ticked on. By afternoon, they were back in Central Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the frozen pond. The air was crisp, and Ethan pulled his coat tighter, his breath visible. Lucas sat close, their shoulders touching, but there was a tension in his posture, like he was bracing for something. "I looked into the Seattle program," Lucas said suddenly, his voice low. "It's competitive, but I could apply. If I got in, I'd start next fall." Ethan's heart skipped. "You'd really do that? Move across the country?" Lucas shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "I'd consider it. For us. But I need to know you're all in, Ethan. No half measures. If I move, it's because we're building something real." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "I'm all in. But what about you? Your crew, your life," he writes, "not just a job. It's who you are." Lucas looked out at the pond, his jaw working. "It's part of me. Yeah. But so are you. I need time to think. To be sure." The honesty in his voice was a relief, but it also scared Ethan. Time was the one thing they didn't have. His phone buzzed again, another message from his boss. "Investor meeting moved to Sunday. Need you here." Ethan's stomach dropped. He showed Lucas the message, expecting frustration. But Lucas just nodded. "Go. Do what you need to do. But come back to me. Okay?" "I will," Ethan promised. But the words felt hollow. How could he keep that promise when his life was pulling him in two directions? That evening, they went to a small bar in Brooklyn, one of their old haunts. The place was packed, the air thick with cigarette smoke and laughter. They found a corner table, and for a while, it felt like old times. Lucas teasing Ethan about his terrible taste in beer, Ethan stealing fries from Lucas's plate. But the ease didn't last. A guy approached their table, tall and broad-shouldered, with a smile that made Ethan's gut twist. "Lucas, man, long time," the guy said, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. Lucas grinned, standing to hug him. Jake. Didn't know you were back in town. Jake's eyes flicked to Ethan. Curious but friendly. This your guy? Lucas hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough to make Ethan's chest tighten. Yeah, Lucas said finally. This is Ethan. They chatted for a few minutes. But Ethan felt like an outsider. Jake was a paramedic. Part of Lucas's world in a way Ethan hadn't been for months. When Jake left, Ethan forced a smile. Old friend. Coworker. Lucas said, his tone casual but guarded. We worked a lot of shifts together last year. Ethan wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he took Lucas's hand under the table, grounding himself in the warmth of his touch. Later, as they walked back to Lucas's apartment, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing ground. Jake's easy familiarity with Lucas, the way Lucas had hesitated, all fed the doubts Ethan had been trying to bury. Was there ever anyone else? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas stopped, turning to face him under a streetlight. No. Never. But I won't lie, it's been lonely. And yeah, I've had offers. But they weren't you. Ethan's relief was tempered by guilt. He hadn't been there for Lucas. Not the way he should have been. I'm sorry, he said again, the words feeling inadequate. Lucas cupped Ethan's face, his thumb brushing his cheek. Stop apologizing. Just be here now. They kissed, slow and deep, the world fading away. But as they pulled apart, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another reminder of Seattle, of the life waiting to pull him away. Sunday morning dawned gray and heavy, the city shrouded in a fog that mirrored Ethan's mood. He sat on the edge of Lucas's bed, his packed bag at his feet, watching Lucas sleep. The rise and fall of his chest was steady, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos in Ethan's head. He had to be at the airport in 4 hours. The investor meeting in Seattle was a make-or-break moment for the startup, and Ethan's role as lead developer meant he couldn't miss it. But leaving Lucas now, after everything, felt like abandoning a lifeline. Lucas stirred, blinking awake. You're staring, he said, a sleepy smile tugging at his lips. Can't help it, Ethan replied, his voice soft. He leaned down, kissing Lucas's forehead. I don't want to go. Then don't, Lucas said, half joking, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. Ethan sighed, sitting back. I have to. This meeting's not just about me. It's the whole team. The company. If we nail this, it could mean stability. For us. Lucas sat up, the sheet falling to his waist. And if you don't? What then? Ethan didn't have an answer. The startup was a gamble, one he'd bet everything on. But looking at Lucas, he wondered if he'd bet on the wrong thing. They spent the morning in a delicate dance, avoiding the inevitable. Lucas cooked pancakes, and Ethan helped, their movements synchronized from years of shared mornings. But the clock loomed, and by noon, Ethan was zipping up his jacket, his bag slung over his shoulder. Lucas walked him to the door, his expression unreadable. Call me when you land, he said, his voice steady but strained. I will, Ethan promised. He hesitated, then pulled Lucas into a fierce hug. This isn't goodbye. I'm coming back. Lucas nodded, but his eyes were distant. I know. Just don't disappear again. The cab ride to JFK was a blur. Ethan stared out the window, the city fading into a gray haze. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Safe travels. I love you. The words hit like a lifeline, but they also twisted the knife. Ethan typed back. I love you too. I'll call tonight. But as the plane took off, he felt the distance growing again. Not just in miles, but in the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Seattle was cold and rainy when Ethan landed. The startup's office was a frenzy of activity, his team scrambling to prepare for the investor pitch. Ethan threw himself into work, debugging code and refining slides. But his mind kept drifting to Lucas, to the way his laugh filled a room, the way his touch grounded Ethan in a way nothing else could. The meeting went well, better than expected. The investors were impressed, and Ethan's boss clapped him on the back, promising a promotion if the deal closed. But as Ethan left the office, the victory felt hollow. He called Lucas, but the call went to voicemail. He tried again an hour later. Then again. Nothing. Panic crept in. Had something happened? Or was Lucas pulling away again? Ethan sent a text, "Hey, you okay? Call me when you can." Hours passed with no response. Ethan paced his tiny Seattle apartment, the walls closing in. Finally, at midnight, his phone rang. Lucas's voice was tired, strained. "Sorry. Long shift. Got caught up in a bad call." Relief flooded Ethan, followed by worry. "You okay?" "Yeah," Lucas said, but he didn't sound convincing. "Just, rough day. Guy didn't make it. Felt like I failed him." Ethan's heart ached. He wanted to be there, to hold Lucas, to take away the pain. "You didn't fail. You did everything you could." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "I miss you," he said finally. "It's only been a day, and it already hurts." "I miss you too," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I'm coming back soon. I promise." But as they hung up, Ethan stared at the ceiling, doubt gnawing at him. Promises weren't enough. They needed a plan, a way to make this work. He opened his laptop, searching for solutions, remote work options, job listings in Seattle, anything to bridge the gap. The next few days were a blur of work and worry. Lucas's texts were sporadic, his shifts unpredictable. Ethan threw himself into the startup, hoping success would give him leverage to negotiate a transfer back to New York. But every night, alone in his apartment, he felt the weight of the distance. On Friday, Lucas called again, his voice brighter. "I got an interview," he said. "The Seattle program. They want to meet next month." Ethan's heart leapt. "That's amazing." "Lucas, don't get too excited." Lucas cut in, but there was a smile in his voice. "It's just an interview. But it's a start." Ethan grinned, hope flickering. "It's more than a start. It's us fighting for this." They talked late into the night, making plans, dreaming of a future where they wouldn't have to choose between love and ambition. But as Ethan hung up, a new fear settled in. What if the interview didn't pan out? What if Seattle wasn't the answer? The weeks that followed were a test of endurance. Ethan buried himself in work, pushing the startup toward its next milestone. But every spare moment was spent planning for Lucas's visit to Seattle. The interview was a beacon of hope, but it also brought new questions. Would Lucas like Seattle? Could he leave New York behind? And what if the program didn't accept him? Ethan tried to focus on the present, but his mind kept drifting to the future. He imagined Lucas in his apartment, filling the sterile space with warmth. He pictured them exploring Seattle's markets, hiking in the nearby mountains, building a life together. But doubt crept in, whispering that it might not be enough. Lucas arrived in Seattle a month later, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder as he stepped off the plane. Ethan was waiting at the gate, his heart racing. When Lucas saw him, his face broke into a grin, and they collided in a hug that felt like coming home. "You look good," Lucas said, his eyes scanning Ethan's face. Tired, but good. Ethan laughed. Self-conscious. Long week. Come on, let's get you settled. They spent the first day exploring the city. Ethan showed Lucas Pike Place Market, the waterfront, the Space Needle. Lucas was quieter than usual, taking it all in, and Ethan couldn't tell if he was impressed or overwhelmed. That night, they cooked dinner in Ethan's cramped apartment, bumping into each other in the tiny kitchen. Lucas laughed as Ethan nearly dropped a pan of pasta, and for a moment, it felt like New York again. But as they sat down to eat, Lucas's mood shifted. This place, he said, gesturing vaguely. It's so different. Quiet. I'm used to sirens and chaos. Ethan's stomach tightened. You don't like it? Lucas shook his head quickly. It's not that. It's just a lot to take in. Starting over here would be a big change. Ethan reached for his hand. We'd do it together. I'd be here every step. Lucas nodded, but his smile was tight. I know. I just need to process it. The next day was the interview. Lucas left early, dressed in a crisp shirt Ethan had ironed for him. Ethan tried to focus on work, but he kept checking his phone, waiting for news. When Lucas finally called, his voice was cautiously optimistic. It went well, he said. They liked my experience. Said I'd hear back in a week. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding him. That's great. Lucas, I'm proud of you. Thanks, Lucas said, but there was a heaviness in his tone. Can we talk tonight? Really talk? Ethan's heart sank, but he agreed. That evening, they sat on Ethan's balcony, the city lights sprawling below. Lucas took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly. I want this to work, he said. But I'm scared. Ethan. New York's my home. My crew. My family all there. If I move here, I'm leaving everything behind. And what if it's not enough? What if we fall apart anyway? Ethan's throat tightened. I'm scared too. But I know I love you. And I believe we can make this work. Lucas looked at him, his eyes glistening. I love you too. But love isn't always enough. We've got to be realistic. The words cut deep, but Ethan nodded. Then let's be realistic. Let's make a plan. If you get the job, we'll figure out the rest together. Lucas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Okay. Together. The rest of Lucas's visit was bittersweet. They laughed, kissed, made love, but the undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. When Lucas boarded his flight back to New York, Ethan felt a piece of himself go with him. The wait for the interview results was agonizing. Ethan threw himself into work, but every notification made his heart race. When Lucas finally called, his voice was flat. I didn't get it, he said. They went with someone local. More experience. Ethan's heart sank. I'm so sorry. Lucas. What can I do? Lucas was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I need time to think. The call ended, and Ethan stared at his phone, the weight of failure crushing him. He'd pinned so much hope on the Seattle program, on the idea of them starting over together. Now, that dream felt further away than ever. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. He started researching other options, paramedic jobs in nearby cities, remote work possibilities for himself. He sent Lucas articles, job postings, anything to keep the conversation alive. But Lucas's responses were short, distant. One night, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He booked a flight to New York, determined to fight for them. He didn't tell Lucas she wanted it to be a surprise. As the plane descended into JFK, Ethan's heart pounded with a mix of hope and fear. This was his last chance to make things right. Ethan landed in New York under a sky heavy with clouds, the city buzzing with its usual restless energy. He hadn't told Lucas he was coming, hadn't wanted to risk another strained phone call. His plan was simple: show up, talk face to face, and figure out a way forward. But as he stood outside Lucas's apartment, his knuckles hovering over the door, doubt crept in. What if Lucas didn't want this anymore? He knocked. The door opened, and Lucas stood there, his expression shifting from surprise to something softer, more vulnerable. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't stay away," Ethan said, his voice raw. "We need to talk. Really talk." Lucas stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was messier than usual: takeout containers on the counter, a pile of laundry in the corner. Lucas looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed from long shifts. "You didn't have to come," Lucas said, sitting on the couch. "I would have called." Ethan sat across from him, his heart racing. "Would you? You've been so quiet." "I'm scared." "Lucas." "Scared we're slipping away." Lucas looked down, his hands clasped tightly. "I'm scared too. When I didn't get the Seattle job, it hit me hard. Made me question everything. If I can't make it work there, what's the point of trying?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice urgent. "The point is us. I don't care where we are: New York, Seattle, anywhere. I just want you." Lucas's eyes met his, searching. "You say that, but your life's in Seattle now. Your job, your future. I can't ask you to give that up." "You're not asking," Ethan said. "I'm offering. I've been looking into remote work. My company's open to it. I could come back here, or we could find somewhere new. Together." Lucas's breath hitched, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw hope in his eyes. But then Lucas shook his head. "It's not that simple. My job, my crew, my family. And you're building something huge in Seattle. I don't want to hold you back." "You're not holding me back," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You're the reason I'm fighting for this." They sat in silence, the weight of their choices pressing down. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice soft. "I need to show you something." He led Ethan to a small box on the coffee table, pulling out a stack of letters. "I wrote these," Lucas said. "Every time I missed you. Every time I wanted to call, but didn't. They're for you." Ethan's hands trembled as he opened one. Lucas's handwriting was messy, raw, full of love and pain. "I saw a kid today who looked like you, and it broke me. I don't know how to do this without you. Another, I'm angry, but not at you. At myself, for letting you go." Tears blurred Ethan's vision. "Why didn't you send these?" Lucas shrugged, his voice thick. "Didn't think you'd want them. Didn't think I was enough." Ethan crossed the room, pulling Lucas into his arms. "You're more than enough. You're everything." They held each other, the letters scattered on the floor. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like they were on the same side, fighting the same fight. But the question remained, what now? The next day, they walked through Brooklyn, talking about possibilities. Ethan suggested a compromise: 6 months in Seattle, 6 months in New York, splitting their time until they found a permanent solution. Lucas was hesitant but open, his trust in Ethan slowly rebuilding. They stopped at their bench in Times Square, the one where they'd reunited on New Year's Eve. The carved words were still there: "Love finds a way." Ethan traced them with his finger, his heart full. "I believe in us." he said, turning to Lucas. Do you? Lucas's eyes were steady, resolute. Yeah, I do. They kissed, the city pulsing around them. And for a moment, the future felt possible. But as they walked away, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another work email. Another demand pulling him back to Seattle. He ignored it, but the tension lingered. Over the next few days, they made a plan. Ethan would pitch remote work to his boss, and Lucas would apply for other programs. Not just in Seattle, but anywhere they could both thrive. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As Ethan prepared to leave again, Lucas handed him the box of letters. Keep these, he said, so you know I'm all in. Ethan clutched the box, his throat tight. I'll be back soon. I promise. Lucas nodded, his smile small but real. I'll hold you to that. Back in Seattle, Ethan threw himself into making the plan work. He met with his boss, pitching a remote work arrangement with a passion he hadn't known he had. To his surprise, his boss agreed, on the condition that Ethan fly to Seattle for key meetings. It wasn't ideal, but it was a lifeline. He called Lucas that night, excitement bubbling in his voice. It's happening. I can work from New York part-time. We can do this. Lucas's relief was palpable, even over the phone. That's huge. Ethan, I'm proud of you. They spent hours planning, dreaming of a shared apartment. Maybe somewhere in New Boston, Chicago, anywhere they could both find work. Lucas applied to paramedic programs across the country, and Ethan scoured job boards for tech opportunities that would give him flexibility. But the distance still took its toll. Phone calls couldn't replace the warmth of Lucas's touch, and texts couldn't capture the way his eyes lit up when he laughed. Ethan kept the box of letters on his desk, reading them when the loneliness hit hardest. One night, Lucas called, his voice heavy. I got an offer, he said. Boston. It's a good program. Great team. But it's not New York. And it's not Seattle. Ethan's heart raced. Boston was closer to New York, but it was still a compromise. What do you think? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I think I want to take it, Lucas said. But only if you're okay with it. We'd still be long distance. But it's closer. We could make it work. Ethan exhaled, relief and fear mixing. Let's do it. I'll look for jobs in Boston. We'll figure it out. The decision felt like a turning point, a commitment to a shared future. But as the weeks passed, the logistics grew daunting. Ethan's company was supportive, but the constant travel drained him. Lucas's new program was intense, leaving little time for calls. They were trying, but the cracks were starting to show. One weekend, Ethan flew to New York to surprise Lucas. He found him at the fire station, laughing with his crew. The sight warmed Ethan, but it also reminded him of what Lucas would be leaving behind. They spent the weekend together, stealing moments between Lucas's shifts. They walked along the Hudson, ate pizza in bed, talked about Boston like it was a promise they could keep. But on Sunday, as Ethan packed to leave, Lucas's mood darkened. I'm scared, Lucas admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. What if we're just delaying the inevitable? What if we can't make this work? Ethan knelt in front of him, taking his hands. We're not perfect. We'll mess up. We'll fight. We'll get tired. But I love you, Lucas. And I'm not giving up. Lucas's eyes glistened, and he pulled Ethan into a kiss, fierce and desperate. I love you too. Let's keep fighting. The next month was a whirlwind. Lucas accepted the Boston job, and Ethan found a tech firm willing to let him work remotely from anywhere. They started looking for apartments in Boston, sending each other listings and joking about decorating disasters. But the distance wasn't the only challenge. Ethan's family, still struggling with his coming out, reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet. The call left him shaken, torn between hope and old wounds. He told Lucas about it, and Lucas listened, his voice steady over the phone. "You don't have to go," Lucas said. "But if you do, I'm here. Whatever happens." Ethan decided to meet his parents, flying to Ohio for a tense dinner. His mother cried. His father was quiet, but they really talked for the first time in years. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a step. When Ethan called Lucas after, his voice was raw with emotion. "I don't know what's going to happen with them. But having you, it makes it bearable." Lucas's voice was warm, steady. "You've got me. Always." As spring approached, Ethan and Lucas prepared for the move to Boston. They found a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but theirs. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, it felt like they were moving toward something, not running from it. Boston was a new beginning, but it wasn't a fairy tale. The apartment was cramped, the city unfamiliar, and Ethan and Lucas were still learning how to be together again. But every morning, waking up next to Lucas, Ethan felt a quiet certainty that they'd made the right choice. They settled into a routine Lucas training with his new paramedic team, Ethan working from a coffee shop or their cluttered living room. There were fights, of course, about money, about time, about the small irritations of living together after so long apart. But there were also moments of joy, cooking dinner together, exploring Boston's cobblestone streets, stealing kisses in the rain. One evening, as summer bloomed, they walked to the Charles River, the water reflecting the city's lights. Lucas carried a picnic basket, a rare night off from his shifts. They spread a blanket on the grass, the air warm and thick with possibility. "I was thinking," Lucas said, lying back, his hands behind his head, "about New Year's Eve. How scared I was that we'd lost this." Ethan lay beside him, their shoulders touching. "Me too. I thought I'd messed it up for good." Lucas turned to him, his eyes soft. "You didn't. We didn't. We're here." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "Yeah, we're here." They talked about the future, not grand plans, but small ones. A vacation someday, maybe a dog, a life built on the little moments that made them. The distance, the fights, the fear, it had all led them here, to this quiet night by the river. As they packed up, Lucas pulled something from his pocket, a small, carved wooden keychain, etched with the words "Love finds a way." "Found this in a shop," Lucas said, handing it to Ethan. "Thought it fit." Ethan's throat tightened as he ran his thumb over the words. "It does." They walked home hand in hand, the city alive around them. The challenges weren't gone, their jobs, their families, the world's judgment, but they were together. And that was enough. Months later, on the next New Year's Eve, they stood in Boston Common, watching fireworks light up the sky. Ethan leaned into Lucas, his breath warm against his cheek. "Happy New Year," he whispered. Lucas kissed him, soft and sure. "Happy New Year, Ethan. Here's to us." As the crowd cheered and the sky exploded with color, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known in years. They'd fought for this, for love, for each other, for a future they could build together. And in that moment, under the winter stars, they'd found happiness again.